VHS tapes. Depending on your age, these are either a perfectly normal part of everyday life or an obscure artifact from the deep, dark past. In the late 80s, when I started filming trains, they were by far the most common format for home recording. And while other formats took over in time, at the beginning of the 21st century, they were still quite common. All of the vintage train videos that I've uploaded so far were filmed on full-size VHS tapes. But as we've reached the end of 2004, it's time for a change. So I thought this would be a good time to do a quick video documenting all of the variety of equipment that I've used to film trains with for the past 35 years. In the spring of 1990, I bought a used video camera system. Not a camera, not a camcorder, but an entire video system. This GE equipment dated from 1982, which was fairly early in home video recording. This is just a camera. It went on a tripod or your shoulder and then connected through a 6-foot cord to a portable VCR. There is also this tuner, which connected to the TV and plugged into the wall, allowing you to use the portable deck as a home VCR. Theoretically, the portable VCR could be carried in a case with a shoulder strap, but mine was old enough and the mechanism was somewhat finicky, so it really worked best sitting firmly on a flat surface. So I tended to carry the camera, the VCR, batteries, and a board in a milk crate, and then use that as a stable base, which usually worked. For its time, this was pretty impressive technology, but after 8 years, it was starting to be a little dated. It took a few seconds to warm up, and then once it did, the white balance had to be set manually, or you could get some interesting results. In bright sunshine, it actually provided pretty good results, and I was quite pleased. However, if the light levels were lower, the quality began to suffer quite quickly, and after dark, it was nearly useless. Despite its shortcomings, I used this equipment to record a lot of video for the next couple of years. Seeing that, my family purchased a new camcorder in the summer of 1991. Also a GE, this unit was much, much more advanced and showed how much state-of-the-art had changed in 8 years. While still using full-size tapes, the camcorder design put all of the equipment into one package that wasn't a lot larger than just the camera that I had been using before. It was still bulky, it was still heavy, and the battery life was still somewhat limited. But it was much more reliable and had much better low light capability, opening up whole new possibilities. For the most part, the GE camcorder replaced the old 2-piece unit and saw regular service into the end of 1996. After our trip to Colorado that fall, it became apparent that it was starting to have some issues and become less than perfectly reliable. So at that point, it was replaced by this Samsung camcorder. In several ways, the GE had better ergonomics, offering manual control of both zoom and focus. On the other hand, the Samsung was the first time I'd had a color viewfinder, and it had easier connections to external power sources and to other VCRs. In those days, copying to another tape with a slight loss of quality was the only real way of editing, so you tried very hard to get things right in the original filming. With a little bit of work, the Samsung performed reliably for the next 8 years, although I filmed less and less the last few years, for a variety of reasons, including the fact that the aging batteries were becoming less reliable. In all, between 1990 and 2004, I filmed enough trains to fill 69 VHS tapes. And it's probably a good thing I stopped at that point, as those tapes neatly fit in one banana box. By the mid-2000s, we were well into the digital age, and it was time to upgrade. So after Christmas in 2004, I bought this JVC Mini DV camcorder. It still used tapes, but they were much, much smaller, although they would only hold 1 hour of footage rather than the 2 on a VHS tape. Unlike VHS, which was an analog system, the DV in Mini DV stood for digital video, which meant that this footage could be easily uploaded onto a computer, edited much more precisely, and then recorded back to a tape without any loss of quality, or burned to a DVD disc. This camera and its batteries were a much more convenient size than the old school camcorders. However, I think it did suffer a little under low light, and on several occasions the VHS came back out if I knew I was going to be working after dark. Also, the JVC had a problem with the sensor and had to go back under warranty. So at the end of 2005, the VHS camera did see some more regular use. About the same time, I also purchased a standalone DVD recorder, which worked much like a home VCR, but using discs, which allowed me to start digitizing all of those VHS tapes, and by the time I was done, those 69 tapes were now on 58 discs. Between 2005 and the end of 2015, I filmed about 15 hours of trains. The Mini DV format was still not high definition, but the picture quality was perhaps a little sharper than VHS. Working on the computer allowed the addition of titling and crossfades, and just in general a much more precise control over the editing process. In those days, I was using Windows Movie Maker, which is certainly not professional editing software, but was surprisingly advanced for something included free with the OS. For the most part, with the Mini DV camera, I continued to film in the standard 4:3 aspect ratio, but it did have a feature that allowed for 16:9 widescreen, and towards the end I started using that, although I think the picture quality suffers a little. By the end of 2015, it was clear that not only widescreen, but also high definition was the way to go. So it was time for one more upgrade. So at that point, I bought this Canon R62. Although even smaller and lighter than the Mini DV camera, the Canon is capable of full 1080p HD video at 60 frames per second. Almost 9 years later, I'm continuing to use this camera, and along the way I've picked up a second identical one, allowing for multi-camera shots that would have been just a dream in the early days. Since Windows Movie Maker was not designed for high-definition video, I also upgraded to Sony Vegas Movie Studio 11, which I'm still using to edit my videos today. So here we have almost 40 years of home video evolution, and that brings my story up to date. Well, almost. Since 2018, I've also had some drones, but I think that's a story for another time.